The repair crew had arrived late. Daniel Hayes stepped off the human shuttle and looked around the grand alien hangar. The floor beneath his boots was made of smooth black stone that reflected dim purple lights from above. The walls were carved, with ancient symbols that pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat hidden behind the stone. He had never seen anything like it before. The alien ship was enormous, larger than any human vessel he had worked on. It belonged to the Tharari Empire, a species known for their pride, silence, and deadly precision. For centuries, humans and Tharari had feared each other. But after a long war and a fragile ceasefire, the two species were finally working together. At least that's what the papers said. Daniel wasn't sure. He was just an engineer, sent to fix a damaged section of the ship as a gesture of goodwill. Most humans were afraid to even step on board, but he volunteered. He had no weapons, no armor, only a toolkit and a clearance badge clipped to his uniform. As he walked deeper into the alien ship, he could feel eyes on him. Alien guards lined the walls. They were tall, with sharp armor that curved like bones. Their pale skin had a slight shimmer, and their glowing eyes followed him silently. Not one of them spoke. Daniel swallowed. He approached a gate where a smaller alien, a royal assistant, waited for him. "You are late," the assistant said, her voice soft but cold. "There was a storm on the way in," Daniel replied. "Had to wait for clearance." The assistant stared at him for a moment, then turned without a word and led him down a long hallway. The deeper they went, the colder the air felt. At last, they reached a massive door made of silver metal, marked, with alien glyphs. "This is the Queen's wing," the assistant said. Daniel blinked. "Wait, the Queen? You mean the actual Queen is here?" "She never left," the assistant said. "She demanded to oversee the repairs herself. No one else is allowed in this chamber. Only you." Daniel hesitated. Is that safe?" The assistant didn't answer. She simply stepped aside and tapped a sequence on the door. With a hiss, it slid open. Daniel stepped inside. The room was dimly lit. Tall windows looked out into space. There was no furniture, only long silk curtains and strange glowing orbs that floated in the air. The air smelled of flowers and metal. Then, he saw her. The alien queen stood at the center of the room. She was tall, nearly a head taller than Daniel. Her skin was pale with a faint silver hue. Her long hair fell like liquid gold over her shoulders. She wore a flowing black gown with silver patterns like stars. A crown of crystal floated just above her head, spinning slowly without touching. But her eyes. Her eyes were glowing violet, and they locked onto him the moment he entered. "You are the human," she said softly. Daniel nodded, unsure how to respond. "Yes, Your Majesty. I'm the engineer assigned to repair the systems in this sector." She tilted her head. "You are not what I expected." Daniel smiled nervously. "You and me both." She stepped closer, silent as shadow. "Do you fear me?" she asked. Daniel didn't know what to say. Her presence was overwhelming. Her beauty was cold and perfect, like a statue carved from starlight. But there was also power in her voice, an ancient strength. "I don't know," he admitted. "You should," she said. She walked around him slowly, studying him like a curious predator. Daniel tried to stand still, though every nerve in his body screamed to back away. "You carry no weapon," she noted. "I came to fix your ship," he replied. "Not to fight." She stopped behind him, her voice low. "Interesting." Daniel turned carefully, trying to keep a respectful distance. "If I may, I'd like to start working on the damaged conduit. I was told it runs through this chamber." "You may," she said. He opened his toolkit and walked to the control panel, embedded in the wall. As he worked, he could feel her watching. Her presence was like pressure in the air, heavy and constant. Minutes passed. He tried to focus on the wires and circuits, but her silence made it difficult. Then, suddenly, a hand grabbed his wrist. Daniel froze. It was her. The alien queen's hand was cool against his skin, but firm. She turned his wrist gently, examining his fingers as though they were tools. "You avoid contact," she said. "Even now." "Why?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Because I didn't want to offend." She stepped closer, her voice low. "Your kind believes we are fragile or dangerous. Which do you think I am, human?" "I think," he said carefully, "you're trying to understand something." Her violet eyes flickered. "And you?" He swallowed. "I'm trying not to mess this up." For a long moment she held his gaze, then she whispered the words that would haunt him later. "Why don't you touch me, human?" Daniel's breath caught. His mind went blank. His hand trembled in hers. He had faced dangerous machinery, emergency landings, and even battlefield repairs under fire. But this was something different. She was not threatening him. She wasn't even mocking him. Her voice was genuine, curious, like she truly didn't understand why a human would hesitate to touch her. Daniel's heart pounded. The silence in the room deepened. Then she released his wrist and turned away. "Continue your work," she said. "But tomorrow, come prepared. I wish to know more about the ones who never bow." Daniel didn't move until the door slid closed behind him. His hand still tingled where she had touched him. Daniel barely slept the night before. He kept replaying the moment again and again, the alien queen's cool fingers on his wrist, her eyes full of quiet challenge, and her voice asking that strange question. "Why don't you touch me, human?" It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a threat. It was a question full of meaning he didn't understand. He had been on alien ships before, but never like this. Never watched like prey. Never invited to cross lines that were never meant to be crossed. Now, as the transport doors opened once again, Daniel felt the tension return. His boots echoed in the same long hallway. The guard still watched him without blinking. He clutched his toolkit tighter than he had yesterday. The royal assistant was already waiting for him. "This way," she said, without a greeting. Daniel followed her through the corridors of the alien vessel. The Queen's wing still felt colder than the rest of the ship, but not in temperature. Something else made the air feel sharp and silent. Before the door opened, the assistant turned to him. "She is in a different mood today," the assistant warned softly. "Speak carefully." Daniel didn't know what that meant. He only nodded. The silver doors slid open with a hiss, and Daniel stepped inside. The chamber was different. Yesterday it was quiet, empty, still. But today, alien music floated through the air. Soft strings and haunting tones, as if the room itself was singing. The glowing orbs above cast a dim golden light, making the silk curtains shine. And in the middle stood the Queen. She was no longer wearing her black gown. Today, she wore a flowing robe of deep violet with silver threads like lightning across the fabric. Her crown still floated above her, spinning slowly. Her long hair was tied back in a braid, and her hands were folded behind her back. She looked calmer. Yet, something in her posture said the opposite. "You returned," she said without turning. "I said I would," Daniel replied. "That means nothing," she said. "Humans often say things they do not mean." Daniel stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance. "That's not just a human trait. Most people lie when they're afraid." The Queen turned to face him. Her violet eyes studied his face. "Are you afraid now?" Daniel was honest. "Yes, a little." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "You're a queen, and I don't understand your rules." Her lips curved, almost a smile. "That's fair." She motioned toward the same wall panel he worked on yesterday. "Continue your repairs." Daniel opened his toolkit and knelt beside the panel. He started checking the connections again, trying to focus on the wires, the data streams, the diagnostics. But she didn't leave him alone this time. She walked slowly around the room, speaking without looking at him. "Your kind keeps distance, always." Daniel glanced up. "It's called respect." "Is it?" she said, stopping near the window. "Or is it shame, Fear? Maybe both. Daniel stood up. We don't want to offend. Some species have strong rules about touch, about space. The Queen turned back to him, her expression unreadable. Your people have never asked us what our rules are? Daniel blinked. I never thought we could. She took a step forward. You think asking is forbidden? I think, he said carefully, that humans were always afraid that any mistake would be seen as insult. The Queen stared at him in silence. Then softly she said, I once had a servant, an old one, who brushed my hair without fear. He never bowed. He never looked away. He said, even stars fall when no one touches them. I didn't understand. Then I do now. Daniel listened quietly. She was opening up to him, not fully but a little. A door left slightly open. You don't have servants like that anymore. They all bow now, she said. They speak in rehearsed tones. They worship me like a god. It is, tiresome. She took a slow breath, as if remembering something far away. I asked you that question yesterday because I wanted to see what you would do. I thought you would panic, flee, maybe apologize and run. I nearly did, Daniel admitted. Her eyes glinted. But you didn't. Daniel slowly walked toward her. You said you wanted to know more about humans who don't bow. Yes, she replied. You're different. You look at me like I am a person, not a weapon, not a ruler, not a ghost. Daniel gave a short smile. Maybe because I've seen machines scarier than you. That made her laugh, a soft, strange sound like wind against glass. It echoed gently in the chamber. She turned back toward the window. Outside stars floated in the dark like distant candles. You are curious, she said. I'm an engineer. We're always curious. She looked over her shoulder. Then be curious. Daniel hesitated. What do you mean? Touch my hand. His breath caught. She extended her hand slowly. The gesture wasn't royal. It wasn't commanding. It was human. Her fingers were delicate but strong, silver blue skin with soft shimmer. They didn't shake. Daniel stepped forward and reached out. At the last moment, he paused. Are you sure? Yes. He gently placed his fingers on hers. Her skin was cool again, but no longer cold. The contact was simple, no power, no pain, no mystery. Just touch, and yet it changed everything. She didn't pull away. Instead, she looked down at their hands, then at him. This is what I wanted to understand, she whispered. Daniel didn't speak. He just let the moment be. Finally, she withdrew, her hand. I was raised to believe humans were unpredictable, dangerous, weak. And now? He asked. She smiled faintly. Still unpredictable, still dangerous, but not weak. Daniel laughed lightly. I'll take that as a compliment. The Queen turned serious again. The others don't like that you're here. There are whispers. The High Lords think I am growing soft, that I seek unnecessary bonds with outsiders. Are you? She tilted her head. I don't know. Maybe I'm seeking answers no one else dares to find. Daniel looked at the panel on the wall. Well, your systems are almost back online. I can finish today. Then I'll be out of your way. The Queen walked past him, stopping just short of his shoulder. Don't rush, she said. He turned to her. Why? Because I haven't decided if I want you gone yet. The words carried more than just casual meaning. Before Daniel could reply, the door opened behind them. The assistant stood there, tense. Your Majesty, she said carefully. There is a situation in the council chamber. The Queen straightened. Tell them I'll arrive shortly. The assistant hesitated. Her eyes flicked to Daniel. The Queen noticed. He is not the problem. Dismissed. The assistant bowed and vanished. The Queen turned back to Daniel. Tomorrow you'll return? Daniel nodded. Yes. Good, she said. Next time I'll ask you something harder. He raised an eyebrow. Harder than touching royalty? She smirked. Much harder. And with that, she walked out of the chamber, her robe flowing behind her like starlight. Daniel stood alone in the room, surrounded by glowing orbs and soft, alien music, wondering what exactly he had just stepped into. Whatever it was, it had only just begun. The next morning, Daniel woke up earlier than usual. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the strange pull in his chest. Maybe it was the way her words echoed in his mind. Next time, I'll ask you something harder. The alien queen was like a puzzle he couldn't stop trying to solve. He prepared his tools carefully, checked every wire, every scanner. But he wasn't thinking about engineering today. His thoughts were somewhere else, on a throne room filled with silence, on a woman who ruled stars and yet looked lonely in her own palace. He boarded the human transport quietly. The pilot gave him a questioning glance but said nothing. News was spreading, whispers among the crew. A human engineer who had been invited into the Queen's private chamber, 3 times in a row. It was unheard of. The rumors didn't bother Daniel. What bothered him was how unprepared he felt for whatever would come next. When he stepped onto the alien ship, the guards looked different. Their stares were colder now. The royal assistant waited at the end of the hall, hands folded tight. Her expression showed concern. "She is expecting you," she said, voice low. "But be careful today." Daniel frowned. Why? There was unrest in the lower courts. Some believed the Queen's attention to a human is dangerous. Daniel's heart beat faster. "Is she all right?" "She is fine," the assistant replied. "But things are changing. Be aware." Daniel nodded and followed her silently through the twisting hallways. They reached the silver doors again. The assistant tapped the panel, but before the door opened, she turned to him one last time. "You're not just fixing wires anymore, human," she said quietly. "You're changing something ancient." Daniel didn't know how to reply. The door opened. This time the chamber was darker than before. The floating lights were dim. The music was gone. Heavy curtains had been drawn over the windows. The Queen stood at the far end of the room, facing away from him. Daniel stepped in, unsure. "Your Majesty," he said gently. She didn't turn around. "Come." He walked toward her slowly. When he reached her side, she finally turned. Her face was calm, but something was different. "I watched the stars last night," she said softly. "I thought about you." Daniel said nothing. "I wondered why you didn't run," she continued. "Why you didn't flinch when I touched you. Why you looked at me like I was real." "You are real," Daniel said. She tilted her head. "Am I? Most people look at me and see a throne, or a sword, not a person." "I'm not most people," he said simply. She stepped closer. "I want to ask you something, human," she said. "But you must answer with truth." Daniel nodded. "Okay. If I were not a queen, if I were just a woman standing before you, would you still come here?" Daniel took a breath. "Yes." The Queen looked at him closely. "Why?" "Because you're not like anyone I've ever met. You ask real questions. You listen. You challenge people. That's rare, even among humans." Her expression softened. Then she walked toward a tall pillar near the window. She touched a control and the floor shifted. A platform rose, revealing an old throne carved from a dark stone. It wasn't shiny or decorated. It was plain, weathered, strong. "This was my mother's throne," she said, "and her mother's before her. For generations we ruled with distance. We were told, never let the outsiders in. Never let them close." She turned to face him. "But I did. And now the court is in chaos." Daniel stepped forward. "Because of me?" She nodded. "Some say I've already been compromised." "Have you?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to him, closer than before. She raised a hand. Not to test him, not to question him, but to gently rested on his chest. "I don't know what this feeling is," she whispered, "but it's louder than politics and I want to understand it." Daniel's heart pounded. He didn't move. He didn't speak. The moment was still, filled with energy, but also peace. Then the chamber lights flickered. An alarm tone rang briefly. Through the walls, the queen stepped back, face hardening. "Someone's entered the inner corridor," she said, voice cold now. Without permission, Daniel looked around. "Should I leave?" "No," she said quickly. "Stay near me." The door opened, and a tall figure stepped inside. It was one of her high lords, dressed in ceremonial armor, face pale with rage. "Your Majesty," he said sharply, "we must speak, now." "This is not the time," the queen said coolly. "You are endangering the empire," the lord growled. "He should not be here." Daniel held his ground. "I invited him," the queen said. The lord's eyes narrowed. "He's clouding your judgment." "I make my own judgments." There was a long silence. Then the queen stepped forward. "Leave, Lord Careth," she said. "Before I forget mercy." The lord looked from her to Daniel, his jaw tight. Then, without a word, he turned and stormed out. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud. The queen sighed and looked at Daniel. "I warned you things would get harder." Daniel nodded. "I didn't expect it to be easy." She sat on the edge of the throne. "I don't need another servant," she said. "I don't need a soldier or a worshiper, but maybe I need someone who sees me." Daniel walked toward her. "You don't need to be touched to be understood," he said quietly. "But sometimes it helps." He held out his hand. Not demanding, not commanding, just offering. She looked at it. Slowly, her fingers reached out, brushing his. Then she rested her hand in his. It was quiet again. No alarms. No guards. Just a queen and a human breaking an ancient rule together. She looked up at him. "They will never accept this." Daniel gave a small smile. "Then let's not give them a choice." She laughed softly, and for the first time her laugh sounded free. The palace walls had eyes now. Ever since the queen had begun allowing Daniel into her private chambers, the ship had grown colder, not in temperature, but in feeling. The guards no longer looked with curiosity, they glared with suspicion. The royal staff whispered in corners. Every step Daniel took echoed like a drumbeat in a silent war. But the queen remained the same. Or perhaps she was changing, but in a way no one had expected. She no longer spoke in riddles when Daniel arrived. She greeted him with quiet strength, no longer testing but trusting. She would ask about Earth, about music, about food, about life outside thrones and orders. Daniel would tell her about beaches, street food, falling rain, and laughing with friends over silly things. Each time he spoke, the queen listened like she was discovering color for the first time. But behind that peace, danger was growing, and it struck faster than either of them expected. It was on the 6th day. Daniel was late arriving at the ship because his transport was delayed for safety reasons. He didn't think much of it until he entered the queen's wing. There were no guards at the doors, no assistant. Silence. Too much silence. He stepped into the chamber, heart beating faster. The lights were dim. The curtains were half torn. A cracked floating orb flickered in the air like a broken moon. Then he heard it. A sharp, short sound, like metal hitting metal. He ran, through the tall arch, past the carved stones, into the queen's private hall. There he saw it. 3 armored Tharari lords standing in a half circle. In the middle was her, the queen, on her knees, blood on her lips. A cut across her cheek. Her crown had fallen to the floor, spinning like a dying star. Daniel didn't stop to think. He charged forward. "Stop!" The nearest lord spun toward him, blade drawn. Daniel had no weapon, but he didn't need one. He reached for a loose metal bar on the floor, likely dropped during the struggle, and raised it as the attacker lunged. Clang! The sword hit the bar, sparks flying. Daniel stumbled but didn't fall. The queen looked up, shocked. "Daniel, go!" "No," he said, stepping in front of her. "You're not alone." The second lord moved toward him, but the queen stood, wounded, breathing hard, but standing tall. "Enough!" Her voice thundered like a starquake. Even bleeding, she was a ruler. The lords hesitated. She walked forward, past Daniel, her hands glowing faintly with royal energy. Her voice became calm, but sharp as ice. "You dare draw weapons in my chamber? You disgrace your armor. You attack your queen and expect mercy?" One of the lords shouted, "You were compromised. The human has poisoned your thoughts." Daniel stepped forward. "She's stronger than any of you." Another lord raised his weapon. "You will not speak in our halls." The queen raised a hand and the blade flew from his grip, clattering across the floor. "I allowed you to question," she said coldly. "I did not allow you to betray." The three lords looked at each other, and then one of them reached for a small detonator. Daniel saw it too late, but she didn't. The queen raised her hand, and a barrier of violet light surrounded them both. The device exploded, sending waves of force through the room, shattering glass and stone. The lords were thrown back. When the light faded, Daniel coughed through the dust, but he was alive. The queen had shielded him. She fell to her knees beside him, breathing heavily. Her hand reached out, touching his cheek. "You are unharmed?" Daniel nodded. "Thanks to you." She gave a weak smile. "Then it was worth it." Suddenly, the main doors burst open. The royal guards arrived, too late. They surrounded the fallen lords, who now lay unconscious or dead. The head captain stepped forward. "Your Majesty, what has happened?" The queen stood slowly, her voice shaking but proud. "There was an assassination attempt. These traitors betrayed their oaths. Let the court know. Their actions will be answered." The guard saluted. Then her eyes fell on Daniel. The guards followed her gaze and finally saw him. Blood on his forehead. Dust on his clothes. Still standing beside the queen. The captain stiffened. "He was here?" "He saved my life," she said. A long silence followed. Then the captain bowed. "We owe him a debt." That night, the queen was taken to the healing chamber. Daniel waited outside. He wasn't allowed inside royal healing rooms, but he didn't care. He sat against the cold wall, knees pulled up, staring at his dusty hands. The images kept replaying. The explosion, her shielding him, her voice when she asked if he was okay. He had seen soldiers fall in battle. He had repaired broken walls during bombardments. But never had he felt more helpless than when she was on her knees bleeding, and he couldn't stop it. The royal assistant approached him, her face softer than usual. "She asked for you." Daniel stood immediately. "Is she all right?" "She will live," the assistant said, "but she needs you now." Daniel followed her into the queen's private medical chamber. The room was glowing with warm gold lights. Alien vines grew along the walls, part of their healing tech. The air smelled of soft herbs. She lay on a raised platform, her robe changed into a plain silk gown. Her wounds were nearly gone, but her eyes were tired. When she saw him, she smiled weakly. "You look worse than I do," she whispered. Daniel laughed a little. "I wasn't the one who got stabbed." She reached for his hand. He took it. "I told you," she said softly, "that I'd ask something harder next time." He nodded. "I remember." "This is it," she said. "Don't leave me." Daniel didn't hesitate. "I won't." The next day, the palace shifted. The queen made a public announcement. The traitors had been dealt with, their names removed from the Book of Honor. But more than that, she declared that humans were no longer to be treated as outsiders. "They have courage," she said, "that even we have forgotten." Daniel watched from the edge of the chamber as she spoke. She wore her crown again, but something was different. She no longer looked alone. She glanced at him once, just briefly, and smiled. And in that moment, everyone saw it. The queen had chosen someone, not as a ruler, not as a symbol, but as a person. The days after the attack passed slowly. Daniel remained on the alien ship, though his mission as an engineer had long been completed. The damage he came to repair was fixed within the first week. But what had broken in the palace, the trust, the stability, the Queen's silence, took longer to heal. He didn't leave, and the Queen didn't ask him to. Instead, every morning she summoned him, not as a guest or a subject, but simply as himself. They walked the long halls of the ship, no longer just private chambers. She showed him old wings carved with memories of wars and peace. He spoke of Earth, of trees that change color, of cities that never sleep, of small coffee shops where people talked for hours about nothing. And slowly, the distance between them, species, status, space, began to dissolve. One afternoon, the Queen invited Daniel to her high balcony. It was an open-air platform at the top of the ship, where you could see stars stretch in every direction. She stood there in a simple robe. No crown, no guards. Daniel stepped beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she asked, "Do humans believe stars can hear wishes?" Daniel smiled. "Some do." She nodded. "And do you?" He looked out into the darkness. "I think stars don't give answers. But sometimes, they listen." She was quiet for a while. Then she turned to him, eyes softer than ever before. "I was trained never to need anyone," she said. "To rule alone, to love nothing, to trust no one." Daniel looked at her. "And now?" She stepped closer. "Now I don't feel strong when I'm alone. I feel cold, empty." She reached up and touched the side of his face gently. "Don't want that anymore." Daniel took her hand just as gently. "You don't have to." Their fingers intertwined, and in that silent moment, something passed between them. Not words, not promises, but understanding. That night, a celebration was held in the Grand Hall, not for a war, not for a treaty, but for peace. For the first time in Tharari history, humans were invited to dine with the royal family. Daniel was placed beside the Queen, not as a servant, not as an advisor, but as someone she had chosen to stand beside her. Some called him the human who stood in fire. Others called him the one she trusts. But Daniel didn't care about the titles. He only cared about her smile. At the height of the evening, the Queen rose and addressed the room. "Many of you feared what it meant when I allowed him in. When I lowered the gates and opened the chamber doors. You thought I had lost my strength." She turned toward Daniel. "But strength isn't silence. It's not distance. It's not isolation. It's the courage to allow someone near when everything in you says to keep them away." She reached for Daniel's hand and held it before the entire hall. He came to repair machines, but he repaired something much deeper. The crowd remained silent, but the meaning echoed through them all. From that moment forward, things changed. In the following weeks, the Queen began new talks with human diplomats. The first ever cultural exchange was planned. Joint science vessels, shared medical research. No more only weapons and warships. Daniel wasn't part of the official meetings, but everyone knew his presence had changed everything. Even the guards who once watched him with suspicion now nodded with quiet respect when he passed. The Queen continued, her duties stronger than ever. But in private, when the crown was set aside, she sat with Daniel on quiet balconies and asked simple questions. What does chocolate taste like? What does a thunderstorm sound like? What is a kiss? Really? And Daniel answered them all, with words, with memories, sometimes with silence. She was learning what it meant to feel, to trust, to choose something not out of duty, but out of heart. One evening, as stars drifted slowly past the window, Daniel stood by the Queen as she reviewed a star map. Your world is so far, she whispered. He nodded. It is. She looked at him. Would you return? Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, Would you let me? The Queen set the map down. If you left, I wouldn't stop you, she paused. But I would feel it. Like a room going cold. Daniel stepped closer. I don't want to go. She looked up, meeting his eyes. I don't want you to go either. And then, without ceremony, without guards, without the weight of tradition, she said softly, Stay. Not as a visitor. Not as a favor, just as you. Daniel took her hand. I was already yours, he said. No contracts, no thrones, just a choice. Her hand tightened around his, and she whispered back, And I was already yours too. From that day forward, Daniel lived among the Thar'ari. He wasn't a prince. He wasn't a soldier. He was simply the human who made the queen laugh. The one who held her hand when the stars grew cold. The one who proved you don't need to kneel to be loyal. And though their love was never spoken in long speeches or golden letters, everyone felt it, in how she looked at him when he entered a room, in how he stood beside her without fear, in how two distant worlds had found a shared breath through two people, one human, one alien. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the galaxy, a throne stood not above, but beside.